Our world is built on forgotten shores. The map of the ancient past is not the one you know, because entire cities now sleep beneath the waves, holding secrets of lost civilizations. This video explores 30 submerged ruins, time capsules that reveal how our planet's coastlines have dramatically changed. We will journey from the Mediterranean to the Pacific, uncovering how these underwater sites rewrite history and challenge our understanding of human resilience and environmental change. By the end, you will see the ancient world in a completely new light, understanding why these sunken stones speak volumes about our shared heritage. How did a vibrant Roman resort vanish into a bay, and what monolithic structure lies hidden off the coast of Japan, defying explanation? Each site is a piece of a global puzzle, showing us that the border between land and sea has always been a story of change. What do you believe is the most important lesson these lost cities can teach us about our own future? These silent cities beneath the waves are not accidents of history. They are the direct result of the planet itself breathing, shifting, and changing its very shape over immense stretches of time. To truly listen to their stories, we need to understand the two fundamental forces that have redrawn our coastlines. The first is eustatic change. This is the global rise and fall of sea levels, a planetary-scale process most famously driven by the Great Ice Ages. When vast glaciers lock away enormous volumes of water on land, sea levels drop, sometimes exposing land bridges that allowed early humans to migrate between continents. When those glaciers melt, that water returns to the oceans, drowning the old shores. It is a slow, relentless pulse that has lifted and lowered the world's bathtub for millions of years. The second force is more local, but just as powerful: isostatic change. Here, it is not the water moving, but the land itself. Think of the Earth's crust not as a solid, unyielding shell, but as a thick, viscous layer floating on a denser mantle. When a massive weight, like a 2-mile thick sheet of ice, presses down on a continent for thousands of years, the land beneath it sinks, compressing like a giant sponge. Then, when that ice finally melts away, the land begins a staggeringly slow rebound, rising back up over millennia. This is why some ancient shorelines are now found high up on cliffs, while others have vanished beneath the sea. It is a dance of sinking and rising rock, a geological waltz set to the rhythm of ice ages. These two forces, eustatic and isostatic, work in concert, sometimes pulling in the same direction to drown a coastline with terrifying efficiency, sometimes working against each other in a delicate balance. A port city might be built during a period of stable seas, only to have the land beneath it gradually sink from tectonic shifts, while global waters simultaneously rise from melting polar ice. The result is inevitable. As leading ocean explorer Dr. Robert Ballard and other researchers note, these submerged sites are not random. They are precise historical markers, frozen in time at the exact moment the sea finally claimed them. They are pages in Earth's climatic diary, and by reading them, we do more than satisfy our curiosity about the past. We begin to see a pattern, a record of environmental change that holds a quiet, profound relevance for our world today. But knowing why these cities sank is only half the mystery. The other half lies in the remarkable science of finding them again. The methodologies of marine archaeology have transformed from tales of treasure hunters to a precise, respectful science of recovery. It begins not with a dive, but with a story. Often, the first clue is a fragment of memory, a local legend passed down for generations about a great city that vanished into the waves, or a curious note in an ancient historical text describing a port that modern maps cannot locate. These whispers from the past give researchers a starting point, a vast stretch of ocean to begin a search that is, quite literally, like finding a needle in a watery haystack. To scan that immense dark space, scientists deploy an array of silent, electronic eyes. Side-scan sonar is a fundamental tool, towed behind a research vessel to send out fan-shaped pulses of sound. The returning echoes paint a detailed, three-dimensional image of the seabed, revealing unnatural shapes, straight lines, and geometric patterns that nature rarely creates. A shipwreck might appear as a distinct shadow, while the foundations of a building can show up as a grid of anomalies. To peer deeper, magnetometers are used. These instruments detect subtle disturbances in the Earth's magnetic field caused by buried iron objects, like ancient anchors, tools, or even the nails that once held a wooden structure together. This combination creates a ghostly map of what lies beneath the sediment. When a promising target is identified, the true exploration begins with remotely operated vehicles and manned submersibles. These robotic or piloted craft descend into the silent dark, their powerful lights cutting through the gloom to reveal a scene frozen in time. Here, the work becomes incredibly meticulous. The golden rule is to never move an artifact until its exact position and relationship to everything around it has been thoroughly documented. Archaeologists use underwater photography and videography to create a precise photogrammetric model of the entire site. Every broken amphora, every stone block, every single pottery shard is mapped in its resting place. This context is everything. A coin found next to a doorway tells a different story than a coin scattered in a courtyard. By preserving this spatial relationship, researchers can begin to reconstruct not just objects but lives. This non-invasive approach allows the seafloor itself to become the primary historical document. The slow accumulation of sediment over centuries acts as a protective layer, sealing a moment in a time capsule. By carefully excavating and recording, archaeologists can read the layers like pages in a book, understanding the sequence of events that led to the city's submersion. Was it a single, catastrophic event like an earthquake-driven tsunami, leaving buildings toppled in the same direction? Or was it a gradual, relentless rise of sea levels, evidenced by abandoned foundations and newer structures built further uphill? The layout of streets, the placement of wells, the design of harbors, all of it combines to offer a ghostly blueprint of a civilization's final days. Through this patient, respectful science, these lost cities do not just give up their treasures, they begin to tell their complete stories, whispering across the millennia from their silent, blue tombs. This geological dance between land and sea plays out with startling clarity across the sunken landscapes of the Mediterranean. For millennia, this inland sea has been a crossroads of culture, trade, and innovation, but its serene blue surface hides a turbulent reality. The very forces that created its dramatic coastline, the slow, grinding collision of the Eurasian and African tectonic plates, have also been its greatest source of instability. This constant geological tension has made the Mediterranean a hotbed of submerged history, where prosperous ports and entire cities have vanished, not over vague millennia, but often in a single, catastrophic night. Take the story of Helike, a powerful Greek city-state mentioned by ancient writers. In the winter of 373 BC, according to historical accounts, the city was utterly destroyed. The chronicles describe bizarre portents, giant columns of flame, and small animals fleeing the area days before. Then a massive earthquake struck, the ground liquefied, and the city, along with every soul within it, was swallowed by the earth. Immediately afterward, a tsunami from the Gulf of Corinth rushed in, covering the ruins with a permanent blanket of sea and sediment. For centuries, Helike passed into legend, a cautionary tale of divine wrath. Then, in the late 20th century, archaeologists, following clues from ancient texts, discovered its remains not on land, but buried beneath coastal lagoons and layers of offshore silt. They found stone walls, pottery, and even a possible temple foundation, all perfectly preserved in the oxygen-poor clay. Helike's tragedy provides a tangible link between myth and geology, a stark example of how coastal subsidence and seismic violence could erase a community from the map in moments. A similar, quieter fate befell the ancient city of Olous on the island of Crete. Once a thriving Dorian port with over 40,000 inhabitants, famous for its treaties and maritime prowess, Olous now exists only as a line of submerged foundation stones and a single row of Venetian-era columns poking above the water in the Bay of Elander. Here, the submergence was likely more gradual, a combination of the land slowly sinking along local fault lines and the steady, post-Ice Age rise of the Mediterranean Sea. The city's inhabitants would have watched their world slowly retreat, abandoning lower neighborhoods to the encroaching water over generations until the sea finally claimed the last of its streets and squares. Today, snorkelers can swim over its ghostly outlines, a silent gridwork on the seabed that maps a once bustling urban center. These Mediterranean sites, from sudden cataclysms to slow drownings, form a collective archive. They tell us that the ancients were intimately aware of their precarious relationship with the coast. Their myths of sunken cities were not mere fantasy, but folk memories of very real geological events. Every time archaeologists match a submerged ruin to an ancient chronicle, it reinforces a profound truth. The stories our ancestors told around the fire, of gods shaking the earth and swallowing cities whole, were often their best attempt to explain the terrifying and incomprehensible forces of the planet itself. The Mediterranean floor, therefore, is more than a museum of broken pottery. It is a library where geology and human history are written on the same sunken page. The ghost of a 5,000-year-old city lies just beneath the surface in a quiet Greek bay. Off the southern coast of Laconia, the ruins of Pavlopetri rest in shallow, crystal-clear water, so close to the air we breathe that sunlight dapples its forgotten streets. This is not a collection of scattered stones. It is a complete urban blueprint, the oldest known submerged city on our planet, preserved with such startling clarity that it feels less like an archaeological site and more like a moment frozen in amber. Dating to the early Bronze Age, around 3000 BC, Pavlopetri predates the glory of classical Athens by millennia. Its discovery in 1967 by oceanographer Nicholas Fleming was a revelation, but its true significance only became clear through decades of patient mapping. What emerged was an entire town plan, a hauntingly familiar grid of life suddenly halted. Researchers have charted its main streets, its alleyways, the foundations of individual buildings, central courtyards, and even what appear to be two-story structures. We can trace the outlines of homes, workshops, and public spaces, allowing us to mentally reconstruct the daily rhythms of a community that thrived when the Great Pyramids of Giza were still new. The city's layout reveals a sophisticated understanding of urban planning, with a clear separation between residential and possibly industrial areas, and a carefully designed cemetery located respectfully outside the main living zones. This level of preservation is extraordinarily rare on land, let alone underwater. It offers an unparalleled, almost intimate snapshot of early urban life, free from the constant rebuilding that obscures ancient cities on dry land. Here, time simply stopped, but what caused this vibrant port to sink? The evidence points to the restless earth beneath it. This region of Greece is seismically active, and Pavlopetri likely experienced a series of powerful earthquakes. These tremors would have damaged infrastructure and, crucially, triggered local subsidence, causing a section of the coastline to sink. Combined with the gradual post-Ice Age rise of sea levels, this geological instability slowly but irrevocably pulled the city beneath the waves. Its submersion was likely a process spanning generations, giving inhabitants time to relocate, leaving their world behind to be gently sealed by sand and sea. The artifacts tell a story far beyond its shores. Ceramics found on the seabed show clear links to the Minoan civilization of Crete and other cultures across the Aegean. This was not an isolated village. It was a connected trading port, a node in a vast Bronze Age network where goods, ideas, and technologies were exchanged. To swim over Pavlopetri today is to glide over a ghost map. The intact street plan is a direct bridge to our distant ancestors, a tangible connection to their organized society, their domestic lives, and their place in a wider world. It challenges the notion of prehistory as a vague and distant time, replacing it with the image of a real town with real people, whose world, much like our own coastal cities, was ultimately shaped by the immutable forces of land and sea. The story of Pavlopetri is one of gradual retreat, but some cities met a far more violent and immediate end. The prosperous city of Helike was not simply submerged, it was erased. In the winter of 373 BC, this powerful member of the Achaean League, known for its worship of Poseidon, god of the sea and earthquakes, vanished from the face of the earth in a single, terrifying night. Ancient historians like Strabo and Pausanias recorded the event with awe, describing immense destruction. According to their accounts, a massive earthquake struck, causing the soil to liquefy. Then a colossal wave from the Gulf of Corinth rushed inland, drowning everything that remained. When dawn broke, Helike was gone, leaving only a saltwater marsh where a thriving city once stood. The catastrophe was so complete, so devastating, that it passed from history into legend, often cited as an act of divine punishment from the very god the city revered. For over 2,000 years, Helike's exact location remained one of Greece's great mysteries, a ghost story whispered by historians. That changed in 2001 when a dedicated team of archaeologists, following meticulous clues from the ancient texts and using core samples, finally located the lost city. They found it not out at sea, but buried under thick layers of silt and clay in a coastal plain near the modern village of Helike. The ruins were preserved in a waterlogged, oxygen-poor tomb, a snapshot of utter calamity. The archaeological evidence paints a stark picture. They uncovered collapsed walls, pottery scattered as if dropped in an instant, and coins dating precisely to the 4th century BC, all embedded in a chaotic layer of marine sediment. This was not a slow sinking. This was a city frozen in a single, catastrophic moment, its buildings felled by tremors and then instantly sealed by the sea's violent incursion. The discovery of Helike did more than solve an ancient puzzle. It provided a sobering case study in the seismic hazards that define the Mediterranean region. It validated the historical accounts, proving they were not mere myth but grounded in traumatic reality. The city's fate demonstrates with chilling clarity how geological forces can act with swift and absolute finality, wiping a community not only from the map but from living memory, leaving behind only stories that border on the supernatural. Helike stands as a powerful testament, a reminder that the ground beneath our feet and the sea upon the horizon hold forces capable of rewriting human history in a single, fateful night. While Helike's story is one of sudden erasure, other cities whisper of a slower, more patient kind of vanishing. In the impossibly clear, turquoise waters of Elander Bay on Crete, the past is not buried. It is right there, just beneath your fingertips. This is Olous, a once powerful Dorian port city that now exists as a ghostly blueprint on the seabed, so accessible that anyone with a snorkel can swim directly over its ancient streets. The experience is profoundly moving. Sunlight filters down through the water, illuminating rows of cut stone foundations, sections of sturdy walls, and long stretches of paved roadway that still run straight and true across the sandy bottom. You are not looking at scattered artifacts in a museum case. You are floating above the actual city grid, gazing down at the very stones its citizens walked upon over 2,000 years ago. This intimate access makes Olous a unique bridge, a direct and tangible connection to a lost world of maritime trade and political intrigue. Founded by the Dorians after the decline of the Minoan civilization, Olous grew into a wealthy and influential independent city-state. Its prosperity was built on the sea, controlling trade routes and minting its own coins. Its political importance is cemented in history by a remarkable artifact, a stone inscription detailing a treaty between Olous and its rival, the city of Lotos. This treaty, carved for all to see, outlined terms for a political alliance and the shared use of a crucial sanctuary, proving Olous was a major player in the complex diplomatic landscape of ancient Crete. So what happened to this thriving port? The evidence points not to a single disaster, but to a relentless, creeping force. Like much of the Mediterranean coast, this area is seismically active. A series of earthquakes over centuries likely caused the land beneath Olous to subside, bit by bit, in a process known as tectonic sinking. This local drop in the coastline was then compounded by the global rise in sea levels following the last ice age, as melting glaciers returned vast quantities of water to the world's oceans. The sea did not attack Olous in a violent surge. It advanced quietly and inexorably, generation after generation. Imagine the slow retreat. First, the lowest warehouses by the docks become unusable, flooding during high tides. Then, entire neighborhoods are abandoned, their residents moving uphill, watching as the sea claims their former homes. The once bustling harbor becomes too shallow for deep draft trading vessels, strangling the city's economic lifeblood. Finally, the last residents leave, and the waves complete their patient work, covering the abandoned city with a blanket of clear, salt water. Today, swimming over Olous, you can almost trace that gradual surrender in the layout of the ruins. The experience transforms history from an abstract concept into a sensory reality. The cool water, the play of light on ancient stone, the schools of fish darting through what were once doorways, it all combines to create a powerful, silent dialogue with the past. Olous does not shout its story like the tragic ruins of Helike. It murmurs it, inviting you to contemplate not just the rise and fall of a city, but the slow, majestic, and unstoppable rhythms of our planet itself. The clear waters of the Mediterranean give way to the deep, powerful currents of the Pacific, where a different kind of mystery lies in wait. Off the western tip of Yonaguni Island, Japan, the seafloor holds a formation that defies easy explanation. Discovered by a local diver in 1986, the Yonaguni Monument is a colossal, shadowy shape rising from the ocean depths. To the human eye, it looks astonishingly like a massive, terraced pyramid or a grand ceremonial platform, carved with precise straight lines, sharp right angles, and what seem to be staircases and pillars. The sheer scale is breathtaking, with the main structure measuring roughly 150 meters long, 50 meters wide, and 25 meters tall. Its appearance is so orderly, so architectural, that the immediate, compelling question arises: could this be the work of human hands from a time before history? The debate that has raged since its discovery centers on this very point. Is it a natural geological wonder, or a sunken relic of a forgotten civilization? Geologists who argue for a natural origin point to the area's unique bedrock. The monument is composed of a relatively soft sandstone that fractures along straight planes due to tectonic stresses. The powerful currents in the region, they suggest, have acted like a natural sandblaster over millennia, eroding the rock along these fractures to create the startlingly clean edges and stepped terraces we see. They compare it to other natural formations around the world where wind and water have sculpted rock into seemingly artificial shapes. Yet, for those who see the handiwork of an ancient culture, certain features are difficult to dismiss. They point to what looks like a perfectly triangular pool cut into the rock, two round holes that could have held pillars, and long, straight channels that resemble ceremonial pathways. There is even a large, flat stone slab resting atop the formation that some interpret as an altar or a marker. If these features are indeed artificial, the implications are profound. During the last ice age, when global sea levels were much lower, the area around Yonaguni would have been dry land, a coastal plateau. A structure of this magnitude would have stood above the waves, not beneath them. Its construction would therefore date to a time over 10,000 years ago, a period mainstream archaeology often refers to as pre-ceramic, a time before the established rise of complex societies in the region. This timeline challenges conventional understanding, suggesting the possibility of a sophisticated, monumental building culture in the Western Pacific at the close of the last ice age, a culture whose story was ultimately submerged by rising seas. The Yonaguni monument stands as a powerful symbol of this enduring mystery. It forces us to question our assumptions about the past and the capabilities of ancient peoples. Whether a masterpiece of natural geology or a silent sentinel from a lost age, it reminds us that the ocean's greatest treasures are not always gold or jewels, but puzzles carved in stone, waiting in the dark for us to decipher their true story. The debate over Yonaguni reminds us that our oldest stories often hold hidden maps. Across the sea, off the western coast of India, another legendary city has emerged from the waves, this time with its name already written in sacred text. In the Gulf of Khambhat, the search for Dwarka has become one of the most compelling quests in marine archaeology. Ancient Hindu scriptures, including the Mahabharata and the Puranas, describe it in magnificent detail as the golden city of Lord Krishna, a majestic kingdom built upon reclaimed land, adorned with palaces, gardens, and a grand harbor protected by mighty walls. For centuries, these descriptions were considered profound mythology, a spiritual allegory rather than a historical record. Then, in the late 20th century, sonar surveys began to reveal anomalies on the seabed. Divers and researchers followed, uncovering a sprawling, submerged settlement. They found large, geometric stone structures, some appearing to be foundations and fortification walls. They recovered stone anchors, pottery shards, and artifacts that, through scientific dating, suggested human activity stretching back an astonishing 9,000 years. The alignment of these discoveries with the textual descriptions of Dwarka's layout and its status as a major port has been electrifying. For the faithful, it is a powerful validation of tradition. For archaeologists, it is a complex puzzle that challenges conventional timelines of urban civilization in the region. The science points to a clear cause for its submergence. This part of the Indian coast was profoundly affected by the end of the last ice age. As the massive glaciers melted, global sea levels rose dramatically, and the land here also experienced gradual subsidence. The combination would have been relentless, slowly inundating the low-lying city over generations, perhaps even centuries, until the last of its towers slipped beneath the Arabian Sea. Finding Dwarka does more than locate a lost city. It builds a fragile, fascinating bridge between the world of epic poetry and the world of geological fact. It suggests that the Mahabharata, one of humanity's longest and most cherished narratives, may contain preserved memories of a real coastline from a distant age, a world map drawn not on parchment but in verse. This discovery invites us to reconsider all ancient legends not as mere fiction, but as potential archives where the drama of gods and heroes is interwoven with the very real drama of a changing earth. The search for Dwarka is not the only mystery the Gulf of Khambhat holds. In 2001, while conducting a pollution survey, oceanographers made a discovery that would ignite a firestorm of debate. Their sonar scans revealed not just scattered ruins, but colossal, geometric shapes resting on the dark seabed. These formations, some measuring hundreds of feet in length, appeared to be massive, stepped structures resembling pyramids, connected by what looked like channels and arranged in a vast, grid-like complex. The sheer scale and angular precision were staggering, suggesting the handiwork of a civilization operating on an almost unimaginable level of ambition. The location itself is a critical clue. Geological data confirms this area was dry, habitable land over 9,000 years ago, a fertile coastal plain before the post-Ice Age floods reclaimed it. If these sunken monoliths are indeed artificial, they would rewrite the timeline of urban civilization in the Indian subcontinent, predating the great cities of the Indus Valley by millennia. The artifacts pulled from the silty depths only deepen the intrigue. Researchers have recovered worked wood samples, stone tools, pottery fragments, and intricate beads. When subjected to carbon dating, some of these materials returned ages of up to 9,500 years. These dates are the core of the controversy. For proponents, they are definitive proof of a sophisticated, pre-Harappan culture capable of monumental architecture. They envision a lost metropolis, a precursor civilization whose achievements were swallowed by the rising sea, its memory preserved only in faint echoes within later myths and scriptures. Mainstream archaeology, however, urges profound caution. The site presents immense practical challenges. The waters of the Gulf are notoriously turbid, with near-zero visibility and powerful currents, making detailed photographic documentation and controlled excavation extremely difficult. Skeptics argue that the sonar images, while compelling, could be the product of natural geological processes. The stepped formations, they suggest, might be the result of sandstone sedimentation and subsequent erosion, creating deceivingly regular patterns. They emphasize that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that without clear, unambiguous artifacts in undisturbed context, like carved inscriptions or unmistakable architectural joints, the case remains speculative. This intense debate is precisely what makes the site so important. It pushes at the very boundary of what we think we know. Whether a natural wonder or a human masterpiece, the sunken pyramids of the Gulf of Khambhat force us to confront a humbling possibility. They ask us to consider that the story of human civilization may be far older and far more complex than our textbooks currently allow, and that our planet's greatest library of forgotten history may still be waiting on the ocean floor. The sunken pyramids of Khambhat challenge our timelines, but another site offers something even more intimate, a direct window into the daily lives of our most distant ancestors. Off the coast of Atlit, Israel, the sea cradles a village frozen in time from over 8,000 years ago. Known as Atlit Yam, this is not a city of kings or merchants, but a quiet Neolithic farming community, one of the oldest and largest submerged settlements ever discovered. Its preservation is nothing short of miraculous, a pristine time capsule from the very dawn of agriculture. Here, beneath the Mediterranean waves, the foundations of simple stone houses still stand in orderly rows. A carefully constructed stone well, its lining intact, speaks of a community's mastery over freshwater. Most haunting of all is a semicircle of massive stones, a possible ritual site where people may have gathered for ceremonies under a sky they could still see. This underwater village offers more than architecture. It holds the echoes of daily life in stunning detail. Archaeologists have recovered the bones of domesticated animals, fish remains showing sophisticated fishing techniques, and the seeds of cultivated plants like wheat and barley. This assemblage paints a vivid picture of a mixed economy, a community that farmed the land and harvested the sea with equal skill. Yet, this remarkable preservation also holds a more somber record. Studies of the human remains found at the site have revealed the earliest known evidence of tuberculosis in our species. This finding provides profound insight into the health challenges of early settled life, as close living quarters with animals created new pathways for illness. The presence of this disease, studied respectfully by researchers, helps us understand the hardships these pioneering farmers faced, even as they built a new way of life. The end for Atlit Yam came not from disease or conflict, but from the same global force that shaped so many ancient coastlines. As the last ice age receded, glacial melt caused sea levels to rise relentlessly. The Mediterranean slowly encroached upon the village's freshwater sources, probably salinating its wells and fields. Generation by generation, the community would have faced a losing battle against the advancing sea until the difficult decision was made to abandon their homes to the waves. Their retreat preserved a moment perfectly, sealing floors, hearths, and graves under protective sediment. To explore Atlit Yam is to witness a fundamental human transition, the shift from nomadic hunting to settled farming, captured in a single, submerged tableau. It reminds us that these early villages, these first experiments in community and cultivation, were built on a shoreline that was never permanent, a frontier between land and sea that has always been in motion. From the humble Neolithic village, we journey to a place of legendary decadence, where the very ground seemed to breathe with a slow, volcanic heat. Near modern Naples, the Roman elite built their most extravagant escape, the resort city of Baiae. This was not merely a town, it was a sprawling, sun-drenched monument to pleasure, perched atop one of the most geologically unstable regions on Earth, the Phlegrean Fields. Here, emperors, senators, and the fabulously wealthy retreated to indulge in the natural thermal springs, throwing lavish parties in villas that cascaded down the slopes toward the brilliant blue bay. The city's reputation for hedonism was so profound that it became a byword for moral decay in the writings of the era, a place where the greatest powers of Rome came to unwind and often unravel. Yet the same volcanic forces that fed its luxurious hot baths were plotting a far slower, more deliberate transformation. The land here does not stay still. A process called bradisism, from the Greek words for slow and movement, causes the ground to rise and fall incrementally over years, even centuries, driven by the pressures of magma and superheated water far below the surface. In Baiae's case, the land began a long, gradual subsidence. Unlike a sudden earthquake or tsunami, this was a sinking so patient it was almost imperceptible within a single human lifetime. Generation after generation, residents would have noticed the sea creeping a little further up the beach, a lower villa becoming flooded during storms, a seaside path needing to be moved inland. It was a retreat measured in decades, not moments. This slow-motion disaster allowed for an orderly exodus. Treasures were removed, buildings were stripped of valuables, and the city was essentially abandoned to the advancing tide. The sea did not conquer Baiae with violence, it simply invited itself in, room by opulent room. Today, the Bay of Pozzuoli holds what might be the world's most breathtaking underwater museum. Divers glide over streets paved with intricate mosaic floors, their colorful tesserae still depicting mythological scenes and geometric patterns. They pass the colonnaded remains of grand villas and encounter marble statues frozen in elegant poses, now home to curious fish and draped in gentle marine growth. A headless nymph, a reclining god, a perfectly carved capital from a long collapsed portico, all stand as silent sentinels in this liquid gallery. The effect is profoundly eerie and beautiful, a surreal fusion of human artistry and natural reclamation. Baiae's submerged splendor offers a unique lesson. It shows us that geological change is not always a cataclysm. Sometimes it is a slow, inevitable pressure, a force that asks not for surrender, but for a graceful, generations-long retreat. This sunken playground is a testament to the transient nature of even the greatest luxury, a reminder that the ground we build upon is never truly solid, and that the sea holds within its embrace not only forgotten villages, but the drowned dreams of empires. The slow sinking of Baiae reveals a patient earth, but other cities were lost with such totality they slipped from history into pure legend. This was the fate of Thonis-Heracleion, a name that for centuries echoed only in fragments of ancient Greek texts and Egyptian temple inscriptions. Historians knew it should exist, a bustling, critical port that served as the mandatory gateway to Egypt for all Greek trade, a place where customs were levied and cultures met. Yet no trace of it could be found on land, leading many to dismiss it as a myth, a symbolic place rather than a real one. Then, in the year 2000, French underwater archaeologist Frank Goddio, working from a hunch and scattered clues, made a discovery in the murky waters of Abu Qir Bay near Alexandria that would stun the world. His team's sonar and magnetometers began to outline shapes on the seabed, shapes that were far too large and too orderly to be natural. As divers descended, the scale of the find became breathtaking. They were not looking at a few scattered columns. They were swimming into the heart of a vanished metropolis. The first images to emerge were almost unbelievable, colossal statues rising from the silt like slumbering giants. A 16-foot-tall red granite statue of a pharaoh, thought to be Ptolemaic, lay peacefully on the seafloor. Nearby, a stunningly detailed statue of the goddess Isis, and a monumental head of the god Hapi, deity of the Nile's annual flood, stared blankly into the aquatic gloom. These were not minor artifacts, they were the monumental centerpieces of a powerful and wealthy city. The discoveries kept coming, giant stone stelae, or inscribed slabs, one bearing a royal decree from Pharaoh Nectanebo I, temple remains with gold ritual objects, and a breathtaking trove of over 60 ancient shipwrecks from various eras, all resting together in the harbor mud. This was a time capsule of Mediterranean commerce, a frozen moment of arrival and departure. Thonis-Heracleion was the linchpin. Every Greek merchant ship entering Egypt was required to dock here first, to have its cargo inspected and taxed before proceeding up the Nile to the inland capital. The city grew fabulously rich from this control, a vibrant international hub where Egyptian priests, Greek merchants, and sailors from across the sea mingled in its markets and temples. So how does such a critical, stone-built city simply vanish? The answer lies in its very foundation. The city was constructed on the unstable, water-logged clay of the Nile Delta. Over centuries, a combination of factors sealed its fate. The immense weight of its own grand stone temples and monuments gradually compressed the soft ground beneath them. This was exacerbated by rising sea levels and, crucially, by seismic activity. Researchers believe a series of earthquakes triggered a phenomenon called soil liquefaction, where solid ground temporarily behaves like a liquid, causing buildings to tilt and sink catastrophically. The city did not slide into the sea in a single event, but likely suffered a series of these collapses over a couple of centuries, until by the 8th century AD, the last of its districts slipped beneath the bay, and the sediments of the Nile quickly buried it in obscurity. The recovery of Thonis-Heracleion has done more than find a lost city. It has reconnected two halves of a historical map. It proved the Greek and Egyptian records were meticulously accurate, transforming a legendary trade route into a tangible archaeological reality. Each colossal statue raised from the mud, each ship's hull documented, rewrites our understanding of the scale and sophistication of ancient Mediterranean trade, revealing Egypt not as an isolated kingdom of pyramids, but as a central, bustling hub in a vast and interconnected ancient world. 8,000 years ago, a hunter paused on a wooded hillside overlooking a river valley, a place we now call the Isle of Wight. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the land stretched far toward a distant continental plain that is now the floor of the English Channel. This is the world preserved at Boldner Cliff, a site that is not merely a collection of ruins, but an entire submerged landscape, a time capsule of a lost European coastline. Here, the sea did not just claim a village, it swallowed an entire ecosystem and the subtle traces of the people who lived within it. As global temperatures rose at the end of the last ice age, the great ice sheets melted, and the rising waters slowly flooded this vast valley, transforming it from a forested home into a seabed. The silt that settled over it created an oxygen-free tomb, a perfect environment for preserving materials that would have vanished without a trace on dry land. What divers and archaeologists are finding there is quietly revolutionizing our understanding of Britain's earliest inhabitants. This was not a barren, primitive struggle for survival. The discoveries at Boulder Cliff paint a portrait of surprising sophistication. Researchers have recovered carefully worked timber, including a wooden platform that suggests the construction of jetties or raised dwellings near the ancient riverbank. They found twisted plant fibers, the earliest known string in Britain, evidence of knot tying and net making for fishing or trapping. Most remarkably, they uncovered a charred, crumbly piece of organic material. Analysis revealed it to be bread, or more precisely, a flatbread made from processed wild grains, tubers, and roots. This tiny, scorched fragment is the earliest direct evidence of bread making in Britain, predating the arrival of agriculture by thousands of years. It tells us that these nomadic hunter-gatherers were not just passive foragers, but active food processors, using heat and technique to transform their environment. They were bakers long before they were farmers. Every artifact from the dark silt of Boulder Cliff chips away at an old assumption, the idea that the Mesolithic era was a simple prelude to real civilization. The advanced woodworking, the intricate cordage, the complex food preparation, all speak to a deep, accumulated knowledge passed down through generations. These people understood the properties of their materials, the rhythms of the seasons, and the topography of a landscape that now lies beneath 40 feet of seawater. Their story is one of adaptation and ingenuity, set against the backdrop of the most dramatic environmental change humans had ever witnessed, the drowning of an entire continent's edge. Boulder Cliff forces us to listen to a much quieter history, one written not in stone monuments, but in preserved wood, fiber, and a crumb of ancient bread. It reminds us that some of humanity's greatest chapters are not marked by towering pyramids, but by the subtle, skilled hands of people living in harmony with a world that was, even then, slipping away beneath the rising tide. The ancient bakers of Boulder Cliff were not alone in watching their world recede. Far to the south, along the rugged coast of Brittany, another Neolithic culture was raising stones to the sky, building a sacred landscape that would one day be cut in two by the sea. On land, the famous alignments of Karnak are a breathtaking sight. Thousands of weathered men here standing in silent, parallel rows across the French countryside. For centuries, these were thought to be the full extent of this ancient monument, but the sea held a secret. In the clear, cool waters of the Bay of Douarnenez, divers made a startling discovery. Lying in just 15 feet of water, they found long, orderly lines of megaliths, menhirs, and the stone tables of dolmens, perfectly mirroring their famous cousins on the shore. These were not random boulders. They were placed with clear intention, forming part of a vast ceremonial complex that now lies partially submerged. Scientific dating suggests these stones were erected around 6,500 years ago, during the same period of intense monument building that produced Stonehenge and the great tombs of the region. Their presence on the seabed is a direct and powerful clue. When these multi-ton stones were first raised, this area was not a bay but dry, likely forested land. The people who built here were not constructing at the water's edge. They were marking a territory that stretched continuously from what is now inland far out into what is now the continental shelf. The submergence of this sacred site was a slow, inevitable process. As the last glaciers of the Ice Age melted, global sea levels continued their long, relentless rise. The Atlantic Ocean gradually advanced, flooding low-lying coastal plains and river valleys. Over generations, the sea would have encroached upon the outer reaches of this ceremonial landscape. The community likely watched as the waters first lapped at the bases of the outermost stones, then slowly climbed higher, until finally the entire section was enveloped, leaving the inland alignments as a remnant of a much grander design. This discovery fundamentally changes our understanding of Neolithic Europe. It tells us that the scale of their sacred geography was far more ambitious than we ever knew. These coastal cultures did not see the sea as a hard boundary, but as part of their world. Their ritual landscape encompassed both the terrestrial and what would become the marine, a unified realm of spiritual significance. The underwater stones of Karnak are more than just submerged ruins. They are a profound testament to a lost relationship with a changing coast. They whisper that the most enduring monuments are not always those that remain above the waves, but sometimes those that have journeyed beneath them, holding the memory of a shoreline that has long since vanished. The silent stones of Karnak rest in the saltwater of a French bay, but a similar mystery lies far from any ocean, in the fresh, cold depths of an American lake. Beneath the shimmering surface of Lake Michigan, a discovery was made that continues to puzzle archaeologists and ignite the imagination. Using side-scan sonar to map the lake bed, researchers identified a series of curious formations on a submerged ridge. These are not shipwrecks or modern debris. They are arrangements of stones, some appearing as low walls or piles resembling ancient cairns, while one particular site captured global attention. Resting under about 40 feet of clear water, this formation looks startlingly like a Stonehenge in miniature, a rough circle of large stones with what appears to be a carved image of a mastodon on one of them. The location itself is the first crucial clue. This ridge was not always underwater. Geological data confirms it was dry land over 9,000 years ago, a time when lake levels were significantly lower due to different climatic conditions. This ridge would have been a prominent feature in a post-glacial landscape, possibly a strategic lookout point or a gathering place for the Paleo-Indian peoples who inhabited the region at the close of the last ice age. The debate surrounding these stones is a classic confrontation between geology and archaeology. Skeptics propose a natural origin, suggesting the stones could be the product of glacial retreat. As the massive ice sheets that carved out the Great Lakes melted, they deposited countless boulders in random patterns, and later wave action from the ancient lakeshore could have arranged some into seemingly orderly shapes. The so-called mastodon carving, they argue, might be a combination of natural weathering and hopeful interpretation. Yet, for those who see human artistry, the features are difficult to dismiss. The circular arrangement feels intentional, and the linearity of some stone piles resembles known hunting blinds or ceremonial structures from other early North American sites. If these are indeed human-made, the implications are profound. They would represent a completely unknown chapter in the prehistory of the continent, suggesting that the early inhabitants of the Great Lakes region were not only skilled hunters but also builders who modified their landscape in meaningful ways over 11,000 years ago. These potential structures, sitting on a now drowned ridge, would mark a sacred or practical site from a world that vanished as the climate warmed and the lake waters rose to their modern levels. Whether a marvel of natural geology or a testament to lost human activity, the underwater cairns of Lake Michigan serve as a powerful reminder. They show us that mysteries are not confined to the distant shores of the Mediterranean or the Pacific. They can be found in our own backyards, lying in wait beneath the familiar surfaces of inland seas, quietly challenging our understanding of how deeply human history is woven into the changing face of the land itself. Sometimes the sea is not the only force that can claim a city. In the lush, mountainous province of Zhejiang, China, a different kind of flood was planned, one with modern blueprints instead of ancient glaciers. This is the story of Xicheng, the Lion City, a place not lost to geological fate, but deliberately sacrificed to human progress. For over 13 centuries, this magnificent urban center thrived, its foundations laid during the Han Dynasty, and its grandeur sculpted through the Ming and Qing eras. It was a place of profound beauty with wide flagstone streets, towering memorial arches honoring local scholars, and intricately carved temples dedicated to both Confucian and Taoist traditions. The city walls themselves were adorned with protective stone lions and sinuous dragons, guardians watching over a bustling community nestled between the Five Lion Mountain and the Wuxi River. Then, in 1959, a decision was made. To power the growing region, a massive hydroelectric dam project was approved, requiring the creation of a vast new reservoir. The valley where Xicheng stood was chosen to be flooded. There was no sudden cataclysm, but a slow, managed inundation as the waters of the Xinan River were directed to fill the basin. Residents were relocated, their homes emptied, and the gates of the ancient city were closed for the last time. As the water rose, it gradually erased the Lion City from the map and from the sky, submerging it under approximately 130 feet of clear, fresh water. What was lost to the world above, however, was not destroyed. The cold, dark, and remarkably still waters of the newly formed Qingdao Lake became an unexpected preservative. Shielded from wind, sun, and the wear of modern life, Xicheng entered a state of suspended animation. The very water that hid it also protected it, leaving its stone architecture astonishingly intact. For decades, the city slept in total obscurity, a secret kept by the deep. Its rediscovery in the early 2000s by divers and explorers revealed a time capsule of staggering clarity. Descending into the gloom, divers found a silent, dreamlike metropolis. Ornate archways still stand tall, their inscriptions legible. Temple roofs retain their elegant upturned eaves. The detailed carvings of lions and dragons on the city walls are still sharp, their fierce expressions visible in the beam of a dive light. The streets remain open, inviting exploration, flanked by the shells of homes and public buildings. Swimming through Xicheng is an experience that blends awe with a deep, reflective melancholy. It is a monument to both imperial Chinese craftsmanship and to the complex choices of the modern age. Unlike ruins claimed by earthquakes or rising seas, this city's fate was a conscious trade, its historical legacy exchanged for electricity and water for millions. This makes it a uniquely poignant chapter in our story. Xicheng challenges the very definition of a lost city. It was not forgotten by time, but knowingly submerged by our own hands. It stands now as a haunting, beautiful question preserved in stone, asking us to consider what we choose to keep and what we choose to let go in the relentless current of progress. Legends often hold a kernel of truth, waiting for the right moment to surface. Along the coast of Tamil Nadu, India, the shore temple of Mahabalipuram has stood for over 13 centuries, a stunning UNESCO monument carved from granite by the Pallava dynasty. For generations, local fishermen passed down a tale of 6 other glorious temples that once stood beside it, a magnificent complex known as the 7 Pagodas. According to the lore, the gods grew jealous of their beauty and sent a great flood to swallow them whole, leaving only the single temple on the shore as a reminder. For ages, this story was considered a poetic myth, a way to explain the power of the sea. Then, in December 2004, a catastrophic tsunami struck the Indian Ocean. The event brought immense hardship and loss to the region, a tragedy that reshaped countless lives and communities. In its aftermath, as the turbulent waters receded from the coast near Mahabalipuram, they performed an unexpected act of revelation. The force of the waves had shifted enormous quantities of sand offshore, and when the sea grew calm, divers and locals spotted something astonishing. Lying on the seabed in relatively shallow water were the outlines of large man-made structures. There were long, straight walls of cut stone, rows of hefty pillars, and the distinct shapes of sculpted blocks, all extending from the present-day shoreline out into the bay. It was as if the ocean had drawn back a curtain for a brief, poignant moment. Following this clue, marine archaeologists conducted systematic surveys. Using sonar and underwater exploration, they mapped a sprawling complex of submerged ruins. They identified the foundations of what appeared to be temple structures, staircases leading into the deep, and scattered stone sculptures worn smooth by centuries of currents. Scientific analysis confirmed these ruins dated to the same Pallava period as the Standing Shore Temple, roughly the 7th century AD. The legend of the 7 pagodas was not a fairy tale. It was a preserved memory of a real, lost coastline. This discovery offers a profound lesson about the dual nature of natural forces. The same ocean that claimed these temples over a millennium ago, whether through a gradual rise in sea level or a past, forgotten cataclysm, used a modern disaster to reveal their existence. It demonstrates how history can lie hidden in plain sight, just beyond the shoreline, and how the very events that cause loss can sometimes, inadvertently, guide us toward rediscovery. The submerged structures of Mahabalipuram stand as a bridge between folklore and geology, between cultural memory and archaeological fact, reminding us that our oldest stories are often maps to landscapes we have forgotten. Divine retribution arrived not with fire but with a trembling of the earth. On the morning of June 7, 1692, the sun beat down on the most notorious port in the Caribbean, Port Royal, Jamaica. This was no ancient metropolis, but a vibrant, chaotic English colony known across the Atlantic as the richest and wickedest city on earth. It was the ultimate pirate haven, a sanctuary for buccaneers like Henry Morgan, where gold flowed as freely as rum and lawlessness was the only true law. The city thrived on plunder, its warehouses stuffed with loot from Spanish galleons, its taverns roaring with the sounds of 1,000 languages. Then, at 20 minutes before noon, the ground began to roar. A catastrophic earthquake, estimated at a magnitude 7.5, struck with unimaginable force. The real horror, however, was not the shaking itself, but what lay beneath. Port Royal was built on a narrow sand spit, a foundation of loose, water-saturated sediment. The seismic waves triggered a process called liquefaction, where solid ground instantly turns into a churning, liquid slurry. The earth did not just crack open, it swallowed itself. Entire streets, fortified walls, and brick buildings simply slid into the waiting harbor, disappearing beneath the waves in a matter of minutes. Over 2/3 of the city vanished into a watery grave, and thousands of lives were lost in the sudden collapse. To the Puritan world, the message was unmistakable. This was seen as the judgment of God upon a modern Sodom, a city so consumed by greed and vice that it was literally erased from the map as a moral lesson. For 3 centuries, Port Royal rested in its shallow, silty tomb, a legend of sunken treasure and sin. Then, in the 1950s, marine archaeologists began to systematically explore the site, and what they found was a revelation. The very sediments that swallowed the city acted as a perfect preservative, creating a time capsule of startling immediacy. This is not a ruin from classical antiquity, but a frozen moment from the early modern world. Excavations have revealed intact brick buildings with walls still standing, cobbled streets leading into the blue void, and a treasure trove of everyday objects that tell deeply human stories. They have recovered pewter plates, clay pipes, glass bottles, and delicate jewelry. One of the most poignant finds was a silver pocket watch, its hands forever stopped at 11:43, capturing the precise moment the earthquake struck and time ended for its owner. This artifact, more than any other, connects us across the centuries to the sheer suddenness of the disaster. The underwater ruins of Port Royal offer a uniquely complete snapshot. They preserve not just the grand architecture of an empire, but the intimate texture of colonial life in a place perched on the edge of both civilization and morality. It shows us the raw, bustling reality of the Atlantic world, a crossroads of commerce, crime, and ambition, all silenced in an instant by the indifferent mechanics of geology. The city's fate serves as a powerful reminder that the forces which reshape coastlines are not always slow or ancient. They can be swift, violent, and utterly transformative, rewriting human history in the span of a single, terrifying hour. Beneath the dark, still waters of the Black Sea lies a landscape that time forgot. This is not merely a sunken coastline, but an entire drowned world, preserved in a state of eerie perfection by one of nature's most effective preservatives, anoxia. Below a certain depth, the Black Sea's waters are completely devoid of oxygen, a condition that halts decay and protects organic materials for millennia. It is here, in this silent, dark realm, that researchers have mapped a ghost geography, a prehistoric terrain now lying hundreds of feet beneath the waves. Sophisticated sonar surveys have traced the outlines of ancient riverbeds, winding their way across the submerged plain, and delineated the stark contours of a long-lost shoreline, complete with cliffs, beaches, and lagoons. This was not always a sea. For much of human prehistory, it was a vast freshwater lake, its surface far lower than today, surrounded by fertile plains that would have been ideal for early farming communities. These plains, now a seabed, are the stage for one of the most dramatic geological hypotheses of our time. Around 7,500 years ago, a natural dam at what is now the Bosphorus Strait is believed to have catastrophically failed. Rising global sea levels fed by melting glaciers finally pushed the Mediterranean Sea over the rocky sill. What began as a trickle became a torrent and then a cataclysm. Salt water poured into the Black Sea basin with unimaginable force, a roaring cascade that could have raised the shoreline by as much as 6 inches per day. The fertile plains vanished, swallowed by a rising inland ocean that may have expanded outward for over a mile each week. For the communities living on those plains, this was not a change of climate, it was the end of their world. They would have witnessed a relentless, unstoppable advance of water, flooding their fields, forests, and homes, forcing a desperate, permanent retreat. The archaeological evidence for these settlements remains elusive, a tantalizing goal for future exploration, but the geological evidence for the flood is etched into the seabed. This event, seared into the collective memory of the survivors, likely echoed down through generations, transforming from a traumatic historical experience into a foundational story. Scholars have long noted the striking parallels between this geological scenario and the great flood narratives found in cultures around the region, most famously the story of Noah's Ark in the Book of Genesis. The concept of a divine warning, a vessel of salvation, and a world reborn from water could very well be the cultural inheritance of a real, catastrophic event that reshaped a continent. The Black Sea floor, therefore, is more than a sunken landscape. It is a potential bridge between hard science and ancient myth, suggesting that some of humanity's most enduring stories were born from the very real experience of watching the coastline disappear forever. Local knowledge often holds the first map to a forgotten past. In the turquoise shallows surrounding Apo Island in the Philippines, a celebrated marine sanctuary, divers do not just encounter vibrant coral reefs and sea turtles. They swim over something far more enigmatic, lines of stone and coral blocks arranged with unmistakable intention, forming walls and platforms on the sandy bottom. These are not natural formations. For generations, fishermen and dive guides have known of these structures, passing down stories of a time when their ancestors lived on land that is now beneath the sea. The walls, carefully stacked from local materials, speak of a community that was intimately connected to the coast, building their homes and defenses from the very reef that sustained them. This sunken settlement, while not yet extensively studied by formal archaeology, offers a powerful testament to the deep memory of place. It suggests that centuries ago, perhaps when global sea levels were slightly lower, a village thrived here on what was then a more expansive shoreline. The community would have lived on the frontier between forest and sea, harvesting resources from both. Their choice of coral and stone for construction shows a sophisticated adaptation, using durable, readily available materials to withstand the tropical environment. The fate of this village was likely a slow retreat, as ocean waters gradually rose in the centuries following the Little Ice Age, or due to local tectonic subsidence. The inhabitants would have faced the same creeping reality as so many coastal peoples. The sea would have claimed their lowest structures first, perhaps gardens or fishing weirs, then encroached upon the foundations of homes. The decision to move inland to higher ground on the present-day island would not have been a single event, but a gradual, generational shift, a constant recalibration of their relationship with the water's edge. This makes Po Island's submerged walls profoundly important. They highlight how the story of changing coastlines is not confined to the Mediterranean or the Atlantic. It is a global narrative written in coral and stone across the vast expanse of the Pacific. Here, archaeology often follows the lead of local tradition, with scientific discovery beginning not with a sonar scan, but with a story told by an elder or a guide pointing to a peculiar line of rocks they have always known. These formations remind us that every inhabited coastline on Earth has its own history of advance and retreat, its own chapters of adaptation now hidden beneath the waves. They represent an undocumented history of resilience, a quiet record of communities who watched their world change and made the deliberate choice to move, leaving behind only their stone foundations as a clue for future generations to find. The resilience of Pacific Islanders is etched into the very foundations of their most astonishing cities. On the island of Pohnpei, a labyrinth of stone rises from the mangrove forests, a city built not on solid earth but upon the living coral of a reef. This is Nan Madol, the Venice of the Pacific, a megalithic marvel constructed over 8 centuries ago. Its towering basalt walls, some weighing many tons, form nearly 100 artificial islets connected by a network of canals. While the heart of the city stands above the tide, a silent transformation is underway. The canals have deepened, and several of the outer islets now slip beneath the water's surface at high tide, a clear sign that this stone kingdom is slowly sinking. Nan Madol was the spiritual and political center of the Sodalor dynasty, a place of immense power where priests and rulers performed ceremonies meant to channel the forces of nature. To build it, the Sodalor's subjects accomplished a feat of staggering logistics, transporting countless prismatic basalt columns from quarries across the island, rafting them across the water, and stacking them with precision to create palaces, temples, and tombs. This was a society that mastered its environment, bending reef and rock to its will to create a capital that seemed to float between sea and sky. Yet, the very foundation they chose reveals a profound vulnerability. Building directly upon a coral reef platform, while a stroke of engineering genius made the city inherently susceptible to the long-term rhythms of the planet. Over the centuries, the combined effects of gradual tectonic subsidence and the global rise in sea levels have begun to reclaim the site. The ocean that once served as its moat and highway is now its persistent challenger. Today, Nan Madol presents a poignant and urgent case study. It is not merely a relic of the past, but a living monument caught in the same environmental processes that drowned cities millennia ago. The encroaching water undermines walls, floods sacred spaces, and threatens the structural integrity of the entire complex. This creates a powerful, sobering symmetry. The same forces that likely contributed to the downfall of the Sodalor dynasty through environmental stress and resource depletion are now actively endangering their physical legacy. Witnessing Nan Madol's slow submergence is like watching history repeat itself in slow motion. a reminder that the dialogue between human civilization and the rising sea is a continuous story, one where even our greatest stone poems are written in sand and water. The story of Thonis-Heracleion is not a solitary tragedy, but part of a much larger pattern of loss. In the very same bay, the waters hold two more names whispered in ancient texts, the sister cities of Manauthes and Canopus. If Thonis-Heracleion was the mandatory customs gate, these were the glittering destinations, the spiritual and cultural capitals of the Canopic coast in the late Roman era. Manauthes was revered as a major pilgrimage site, home to a magnificent temple dedicated to the goddess Isis, a place where the sick and hopeful traveled for healing and divine dreams. Nearby, Canopus thrived as a vibrant center of learning and, notoriously, pleasure, its streets lined with sanctuaries to serapes and taverns that became synonymous with revelry across the empire. Together, they formed a powerful trio of cities, a dense cluster of human ambition built upon the same fragile ground. Their fate, however, would be shared. The geological forces that claimed Thonis-Heracleion showed no favoritism. The same unstable, waterlogged sediments of the Nile Delta lay beneath their grand temples and bustling harbors. A series of devastating earthquakes, likely the same events that shook the region in the 8th century, triggered catastrophic soil liquefaction. The solid earth beneath these cities turned to slurry, causing their massive stone monuments to tilt and sink. Compounding this, research suggests powerful tsunamis generated by these quakes swept through the bay, delivering a final, drowning blow to structures already crippled by the failing ground. The process was likely swift and terrifying, a geological 1-2 punch that erased these thriving centers from the map within a historical blink of an eye. For centuries, they existed only as place names in old scrolls and fragmented histories, their physical reality doubted. Then, underwater explorations led by archaeologists like Frank Gaudio began to find them. The seabed near Alexandria yielded yet more treasures, colossal statues of Ptolemaic rulers, graceful sphinxes keeping their eternal watch, and the scattered columns of what was once the great Serapeum of Canopus. Each discovery adds another piece to a stunning mosaic, revealing that this single bay was not the grave of one great port, but of an entire metropolitan region. The finds from Manauthes and Canopus do more than catalogue lost buildings. They help us understand the incredible cultural density of this ancient coastline. This was not a place of isolated settlements, but a connected network of specialized cities, a spiritual and economic powerhouse where pilgrims, philosophers, merchants, and sailors all converged. Their collective disappearance beneath Abu Qir Bay transforms a local mystery into a profound lesson in geological risk. It shows us that when civilizations cluster in vulnerable landscapes, they can share the same fate, their stories sinking together into the same silent archive of sand and sea. The legends they left behind were not exaggerations, but the faint, echoing memories of a shoreline that simply vanished. King Herod the Great demanded a harbor worthy of his name and his empire. On the coast of Judea, where only an open roadstead existed, he ordered the impossible, a deep water port built directly into the tempestuous Mediterranean. The result was Caesarea Maritima, a city of staggering ambition, and its crown jewel was a harbor complex hailed as one of the engineering wonders of the ancient world. Two colossal breakwaters, one stretching over 2,000 feet, reached out from the shore to embrace the sea, creating a calm, safe anchorage for hundreds of ships. This was not just a wharf, it was a statement of power, a technological marvel designed to funnel the wealth of Rome directly to Herod's doorstep. Today, to understand the scale of that ambition, you must look beneath the waves. Much of that monumental harbor infrastructure now rests on the seabed, a silent testament to a battle between human ingenuity and the immutable forces of geology. The primary culprit was a slow, persistent tectonic subsidence, As the land beneath this part of the coast gradually sank over the centuries, this local sinking was compounded by the global rise in sea levels following the last ice age, a 1-2 punch that inevitably pulled Herod's stone giants beneath the surface. Underwater archaeologists mapping these sunken breakwaters have uncovered the secret to their original strength. The Romans employed a revolutionary material known as hydraulic concrete, a mixture that could actually set and harden underwater. They would construct wooden forms directly on the seafloor, then pour in this special concrete, which used volcanic ash to create a chemical reaction with the saltwater, forming a rock-solid mass. The remains of these concrete blocks, some the size of small houses, still lie where they were placed, their precise placement revealing an understanding of hydrodynamics that feels astonishingly modern. Within the sheltered silt of the drowned harbor itself, researchers have found another kind of time capsule, well-preserved shipwrecks from various eras. These vessels, some merchant traders, others perhaps part of the Roman fleet, sank at their moorings and were gently buried, their hulls and cargoes preserved in the anaerobic mud. Together, the sunken engineering and the silent ships tell a complete story. Caesarea's submerged wharves are more than ruins, they are a direct lesson in scale and surrender. They showcase the peak of Roman engineering ambition, a moment when humanity believed it could permanently tame the coastline. Yet their current position beneath meters of Mediterranean water also charts the inevitable victory of the sea. It is a powerful duality, observing how the very materials created to defy the ocean now provide its most permanent and eloquent record of that defiance. The deliberate sacrifice of a city is a choice that echoes through centuries. On the strategic waterways of the Scheldt estuary, the prosperous medieval city of Sefting met its end not by earthquake or rising sea, but by a calculated decision of war. In 1584, during the brutal conflict known as the 80 Years' War, Dutch defenders faced an advancing Spanish army. To halt their progress, the Dutch made a devastating choice. They deliberately breached the protective dikes, unleashing the North Sea upon their own land. The strategic flood succeeded in its military goal, but at a terrible, permanent cost. The rushing waters permanently inundated Sefting and its surrounding fertile farmland, swallowing the city whole and transforming the region into a vast, treacherous tidal marsh known today as the drowned land of Sefting. While not ancient by the standards of our other ruins, Sefting's story is a crucial and sobering chapter. It represents a powerful example of human-caused submergence, a coastline redrawn not by geological force, but by the desperate calculus of conflict. The prosperous port with its homes, church, and fields vanished beneath the silt-laden waters, leaving behind only local legends of a sunken land where, on quiet nights, the bells of the drowned church are said to still ring from deep within the mud. This tale shifts our perspective profoundly. It reminds us that the maps of our past are not only shaped by the slow patience of nature or sudden seismic violence. They can also be violently rewritten by human hands, by the wrenching decisions made in moments of crisis that leave landscapes and histories permanently altered. Sefting stands as a monument to a different kind of loss, where the coastline became a casualty of war, and a thriving community was sacrificed to the sea to serve a larger, tragic strategy. The dark, flooded caves of the Yucatan hold a different kind of archive, one written in stillness and shadow. These are the cenotes, vast natural sinkholes that lead into an endless labyrinth of underwater caverns. While not the stone ruins of a city, this submerged karst landscape is an archaeological treasure chest of unimaginable value, preserving moments from the world of the ancient Maya and those who came before them with almost magical fidelity. During the last ice age, when sea levels were far lower, these intricate cave systems were dry, accessible chambers deep within the limestone bedrock. For the earliest peoples of the region, they were vital sources of freshwater and places of profound spiritual significance, seen as portals to the underworld, or Zabalba. Within these sacred dark spaces, they conducted rituals, left offerings, and sometimes laid their loved ones to rest. Then, as the great glaciers melted, the oceans rose. The groundwater table climbed steadily, silently flooding these dry caves from below. The invasion was not violent but total, turning sacred caverns into silent, water-filled cathedrals. This sudden flooding created a time capsule of extraordinary preservation. The cool, mineral-rich water, with little current and no light, halts decay. Divers exploring these submerged tunnels have encountered scenes frozen in time. They have found the resting places of individuals from millennia past, their skeletal remains often lying undisturbed in ceremonial contexts, accompanied by pottery vessels and personal artifacts. In other chambers, they have discovered the bones of extinct megafauna, like giant ground sloths, that wandered into the caves and never found their way out. Perhaps one of the most startling discoveries is evidence of early mining. In one cave system, divers found piles of mined rock, stone tools, and navigational markers, revealing that people over 10,000 years ago were venturing deep underground to extract valuable red ochre, a pigment used for ritual body painting and art. This finding pushes back the timeline of complex human activity in the Americas, showing a purposeful, organized interaction with the subterranean world long before the rise of known civilizations. The flooded cenotes present a unique archaeological challenge and opportunity. They are not a single site, but an entire drowned landscape, a three-dimensional map of human exploration and belief. Every artifact, every set of remains, every charcoal torch mark on a ceiling is held in perfect context, exactly where it was left. This allows researchers to reconstruct not just what people did, but the paths they took and the intentions they held in the profound darkness. These water-filled caves remind us that the most important ruins are not always towering pyramids. Sometimes they are the quiet, submerged spaces where early humans faced the dark, sought meaning, and left behind a record of their journey, perfectly preserved by the very waters that sealed them away. Far from the flooded caves of the Yucatan, in the warm, shallow waters of the Gulf of Thailand, the seabed holds a collection of silent stone sentinels. Scattered near islands like Koh Tang, these are not natural formations, but large, carefully crafted jars, their shapes eerily familiar to anyone who knows the inland mysteries of Laos. They are the submerged cousins of the famous Plain of Jars, those enigmatic stone vessels that dot a plateau hundreds of miles from any ocean. Finding them here beneath the waves transforms a regional puzzle into a continental mystery. Each jar is a hollowed-out cylinder of stone, some standing several feet tall, with a distinct rim and a heavy, rounded body. They were clearly shaped by human hands, using techniques that required patience, skill, and a specific cultural intention. But what was that intention, and who were the people that carried it out across such a vast, now drowned landscape? The jars themselves offer no inscriptions, no carvings to decode. Their purpose is a subject of quiet speculation among researchers. The leading theory, drawn from studies of their terrestrial counterparts, suggests they served as funerary urns. In this interpretation, the jars would have held the remains of individuals, acting as monumental resting places that honored the departed and marked a sacred connection to the land. Others propose they could have been used for storage, perhaps for grain, water, or fermented beverages, serving a vital practical role in a community's survival. Whatever their specific use, their deliberate placement and sheer effort of creation speak to a society with shared rituals and a structured belief system. The true revelation, however, lies not just in the jars but in their location. They rest on what was over 10,000 years ago, not a seabed at all. During the last ice age, the continental shelf of Southeast Asia was a vast, exposed plain, a fertile extension of the mainland known as Sunderland. This was a rich, habitable world of rivers, forests, and grasslands, a lost continent that connected present-day islands like Java, Sumatra, and Borneo to the Asian mainland. The stone jars now underwater were originally placed on dry land, within a territory that stretched far beyond today's fragmented coastline. Their submergence was a slow, global event, as melting glaciers raised ocean levels and patiently flooded this low-lying continent, forcing its human inhabitants to retreat toward the higher ground that became our modern islands and shores. This discovery profoundly expands the scale of the mystery. It suggests the jar-burying culture was not a small, isolated group, but a widespread society whose domain encompassed a now vanished geography. Their artifacts are waypoints on a lost map, marking a cultural footprint that the rising seas fragmented and concealed. Each submerged jar is therefore a dual marker. It points to a specific, unknowable ceremony from the deep past, and it also charts a precise point on a coastline that has long since vanished. They are buoys anchored not in water, but in time, reminding us that some of humanity's most enduring mysteries are not hidden in jungles or deserts, but are waiting in the gentle blue twilight of the continental shelf where land once was. The Roman elite did not stop at Baiae. All along the sweeping crescent of the Bay of Naples, the wealthy carved their leisure into the very shoreline, building lavish seaside villas where the view was as important as the architecture. These were not simple country homes but sprawling maritime estates, designed to fuse indoor luxury with the outdoor splendor of the coast. At places like the Villa dei Pisoni at Mercairo, the line between land and sea was deliberately blurred. Architects built nymphea, artificial grottos decorated with statues and mosaics where the sound of trickling water would create a cool, serene retreat. They constructed elaborate fish ponds, not just for aquaculture but as living art, where guests could admire the play of light on colorful species through the clear water. Private docks extended like stone fingers into the bay, allowing guests to arrive directly by boat, stepping from the deck into a world of cultivated beauty. This was the pinnacle of coastal living, a conscious celebration of the shoreline's bounty and beauty. Their fate, however, was written by the same restless geology that claimed Baiae. The entire region sits on the Phlegrean Fields, a supervolcanic caldera where the ground breathes with a slow, volcanic rhythm known as bradysism. Over centuries, this incremental sinking of the coastline, combined with the global rise in sea levels, began a patient reclamation. Unlike a city swallowed by a tsunami, this was a genteel, almost polite retreat. The sea did not attack these villas, it invited itself in, inch by inch, over generations. A lower terrace might flood during a storm and never fully drain. A seaside nymphaeum, once a place for quiet reflection, would gradually become a tidal pool, its statues now wreathed in seaweed. The private dock, once a symbol of connection to the wider Mediterranean world, would sink beneath the waves, becoming a hidden reef. This slow-motion transformation offers a different kind of story. It shows a changing coastline not as a sudden catastrophe, but as a persistent background pressure, a force that asks for adaptation and eventually surrender. The sunken villas of the Bay of Naples present a hauntingly beautiful paradox. They are ruins of immense luxury being reclaimed by the very element they were built to admire. Swimming over their submerged mosaics today, you witness a dialogue between human ambition and planetary time, a reminder that even the most splendid constructions are temporary guests upon a shore that is always imperceptibly on the move. The story of our continent does not end at its current shoreline. Beneath the cold, gray waves of the North Sea lies an entire lost world, a missing piece of the European map known as Doggerland. This was not a city or a village, but a vast, fertile plain, a verdant continent in its own right that once connected the British Isles to the mainland of Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands. For thousands of years, it was home to thriving ecosystems and the Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who depended on them. Imagine a landscape of rolling hills, dense forests, meandering rivers, and marshy lagoons, teeming with red deer, aurochs, and mammoths. This was the real heartland of ancient Europe, a crossroads where early humans lived, hunted, and migrated. Its existence fundamentally reshapes our understanding of prehistory, revealing that Britain was not always an island, but the western frontier of a much larger, connected territory. The evidence for this lost land comes not from grand ruins, but from the unlikeliest of sources. For over a century, fishermen trawling the Doggerbank, a shallow sandbank in the middle of the North Sea, have been hauling up puzzling artifacts in their nets. Among the cod and sole, they have found the bones of long-extinct animals, perfectly preserved stone tools crafted by human hands, and even lumps of ancient peat containing the remnants of trees and plants. These were not isolated finds. Dredging operations have recovered antler harpoons, flint blades, and evidence of campfires, all resting on what is now the seabed. Each object is a message in a bottle from a drowned world, confirming that people did not just pass through this area but lived full, rich lives upon it. They followed the herds, fished the rivers, and gathered resources, their entire culture adapted to a landscape that no longer exists. The end of Doggerland was not a sudden cataclysm, but a slow, relentless, and inevitable transformation. As the last great ice age waned, beginning around 18,000 years ago, the colossal glaciers began to melt. This released unimaginable volumes of water back into the world's oceans, causing global sea levels to rise at a pace that, while slow by human standards, was unstoppable over generations. The North Sea began to refill, its waters creeping inland year by year, century by century. For the people of Doggerland, this was a lifetime of slow retreat. They would have witnessed their familiar world gradually shrinking. A favorite hunting ground by a river bend might become a salt marsh, then a lagoon, and finally open water. Forests would die as the saltwater poisoned their roots. The coastlines they knew would relentlessly move inward, compressing their territory. This was a profound environmental pressure, a force that demanded constant adaptation, and ultimately a decision to abandon a homeland that was being erased from the map. By around 5,500 years ago, the rising seas had won. The last hilltops of Doggerland, perhaps once islands where communities made their final stand, slipped beneath the waves. The North Sea, as we know it, was formed, and Britain was severed from the continent, becoming an island. This geographical divorce had monumental consequences for human history, isolating cultures and setting them on divergent paths. The story of Doggerland is perhaps the most humbling of all. It shows us that the most dramatic changes to our world are not always marked by fallen columns or drowned temples. Sometimes they are silent, patient, and total, swallowing not just settlements but entire ecosystems and the invisible paths of our ancestors. It reminds us that the maps we hold today are temporary, and that the true shape of our past is often hidden beneath the quiet, dark water just beyond the shore. The clear Mediterranean that claimed so many ports also holds the story of a city divided between land and sea. On the coast of modern Libya, the ancient Greek colony of Apollonia presents a stunning duality. You can walk among its sun-baked theaters and Byzantine churches on the cliff-tops, then glance down to see the same city continuing into the azure water below. Founded in the 7th century before the Common Era, Apollonia served as the vital seaport for the powerful inland city of Cyrene, funneling its famous grain and silphium, a now extinct plant prized as a spice and medicine, out to the wider Greek world. Its harbor was its lifeblood, a bustling center of commerce and naval activity. Today, that harbor, along with several grand public buildings, lies submerged in the shallow, transparent waters just off the beach. The cause was a familiar partnership of forces in this seismically active region. A series of earthquakes over the centuries caused local subsidence, lowering this section of the coastline. This sinking was then amplified by the relentless post-Ice Age rise of the Mediterranean Sea. The water did not rush in, but advanced with a slow, patient certainty, transforming the city's maritime heart into an underwater museum. The visible ruins are hauntingly beautiful. Rows of stone columns, toppled but still aligned, rest on the sandy bottom like a submerged forest. The massive ashlar blocks of quay walls and breakwaters trace the ghostly outline of the ancient port. Foundations of what were likely warehouses or administrative buildings are clearly visible, their rectangular forms outlined against the seafloor. Swimming here is to navigate a space that was once filled with the shouts of dockworkers, the creak of ship timbers, and the scent of exotic cargo. Apollonia's partial submergence offers a crucial lesson for how we understand the classical world. It reminds us that the archaeological sites we visit on land are often incomplete. For a port city, the most critical infrastructure, the very reason for its existence, was built at the water's edge. When that edge moves, a vital piece of the historical puzzle sinks beneath the waves. The full story of Apollonia's trade, its naval capacity, and its daily connection to the Mediterranean cannot be told solely from the ruins on the hill. It requires us to look into that clear, shallow water and integrate what we find there with what we see above. This city, half on land and half at sea, becomes a perfect metaphor. It shows that the boundary between terrestrial and marine archaeology is an artificial one, a line drawn by our own temporary perspective. To truly know these ancient coastal societies, we must be willing to follow their footsteps right off the map into the gentle embrace of the sea that both sustained them and, in the end, claimed a part of their legacy. The world's highest navigable lake holds secrets in its cold, deep water. Lake Titicaca, straddling the border of Bolivia and Peru, is more than a breathtaking Andean landmark. Beneath its famously still, reflective surface lies a submerged landscape that speaks to a forgotten chapter of pre-Columbian history. Explorations by underwater archaeologists have mapped a series of enigmatic stone structures resting on the lakebed near the sacred island of the sun. These are not random piles of rock. They form what appear to be deliberate walls, stepped agricultural terraces, and the foundations of a possible ceremonial complex, all lying in silent order under the water's blue embrace. The craftsmanship points to a sophisticated culture, one that understood stone and landscape intimately. Based on their style and location, researchers believe these sunken ruins are likely the work of the Tiwanaku civilization, a powerful society that flourished in the region over 1,000 years ago, long before the rise of the Inca Empire. The Tiwanaku were master engineers and agricultural innovators, known for their monumental architecture on land. Finding their work beneath the lake adds a profound new dimension to their story. It suggests their sacred and practical geography extended into areas we now consider part of the lake itself. The question then becomes, how did these structures end up underwater? The answer lies in the dynamic nature of this high-altitude environment. Lake Titicaca is not a static bathtub. Its water level has risen and fallen dramatically over the centuries, driven by long-term climatic cycles of rainfall and drought. During drier periods, the lake's shoreline would have receded, exposing new land. It is on these temporarily exposed plains that the Tiwanaku likely built their terraces and temples, taking advantage of fertile soil and a connection to the sacred waters. Then, when the climate shifted again toward a wetter phase, the lake would have expanded, slowly and steadily reclaiming the land it had yielded. The structures were not engulfed by a sudden flood, but by a patient, generational advance of water. This slow submergence preserved them in place, creating an underwater archive of Tiwanaku expansion and adaptation. The significance of these finds extends far beyond the Andes. They remind us that significant ruins are not only hidden in the saltwater of oceans and seas. Inland lakes and rivers, subject to their own rhythms of change, can also become guardians of lost history. Ancient cultures did not always build on permanently stable ground. They often inhabited dynamic environments where shorelines were fluid, responding to the long, slow pulse of the climate. A terrace built for farming could, centuries later, become a reef for lake fish. A temple foundation laid on dry land might one day serve as an anchor for aquatic plants. These submerged stoneworks in Lake Titicaca challenge a static view of the past. They show us that the relationship between human settlement and water was always a negotiation, a careful reading of environmental signs that could, over great spans of time, lead to a peaceful surrender to the rising tide. The gentle submergence of Apollonia finds a poetic echo in the warm, turquoise waters of southern Turkey. Here, the past does not lie in dark, hidden depths, but is presented in a gallery of sunlight and clarity. This is the sunken city of Kakova, a place where history did not so much collapse as it gracefully settled into the landscape. The ruins here belong to the ancient Lycian city of Dulkist, a community that thrived for centuries along this rugged, beautiful coast. Its story changed in the 2nd century when a series of powerful earthquakes struck the region. The ground did not simply shake, it shifted. Entire sections of the coastline, including neighborhoods of Dulkist, slid downward in a geological event known as subsidence, allowing the sea to flow calmly into streets and homes. This was not a violent drowning by tsunami, but a quiet lowering, as if the land itself exhaled and sank a few meters deeper, inviting the Mediterranean to take up residence. The result today is an archaeological scene of breathtaking serenity. The water is so transparent it acts as a lens, magnifying every detail on the sandy bottom. You can see the clear outlines of stone foundations, the steps of ancient staircases that now lead only to schools of silvery fish, and the rectangular footprints of homes where families once lived. A Byzantine church built centuries after the earthquake now stands half submerged, its apse open to the sky and its floor a mosaic of light dancing on stone. Some walls rise just above the waterline, creating a haunting silhouette against the horizon, a line of broken teeth biting at the sea and sky. This partial visibility is what makes Kakova so uniquely compelling. The past is not fully buried or fully exposed, but suspended in a state of beautiful decay. It invites quiet observation rather than intense excavation. The site is so visually precious and culturally sensitive that it is now a protected area. Boats are not permitted to anchor or come close. They must drift by at a respectful distance, allowing visitors to contemplate the scene without disturbing its fragile peace. This policy turns viewing into a form of meditation. You cannot touch these stones, but you can feel their story. Kakova represents a different kind of dialogue with a lost coastline. It is not a tale of sudden erasure or heroic recovery, but of a slow, aesthetic integration. The sea did not conquer this city, it adopted it, weaving the ruins into a new, living tapestry of light, water, and stone. It stands as a gentle reminder that not all endings are catastrophic. Some are simply transitions where human history becomes a quiet, permanent feature of the natural world, asking only that we look and wonder from a respectful distance. 40 meters down in the dark, a solitary stone giant keeps its vigil. On the submerged plateau between Sicily and Tunisia known as the Adventure Bank, a single 12-meter-long monolith rests on the seabed, a silent enigma in the deep blue twilight. This is not a natural formation. The colossal block of stone displays clear evidence of human workmanship, with regular, drilled holes and a distinctly geometric shape that speaks of intention, of a purpose we can no longer decipher. Its isolation is profound. There are no surrounding walls, no companion stones, just this one immense carved object lying alone on the continental shelf, as if placed there by a forgotten hand and then utterly abandoned. The key to its mystery lies not in its form, but in its location. Today, it sits under 130 feet of seawater, but 12,000 years ago, during the last glacial maximum, this was a dramatically different world. Sea levels were over 100 meters lower, and what is now the Adventure Bank was not a sunken plateau, but a chain of rugged islands rising from a narrow strait. This was a vital maritime passage, a stepping stone corridor between Europe and Africa that would have been crucial for early seafarers. The monolith was not built underwater. It was erected on dry land, on an island that commanded views of this ancient seaway. Its purpose is a subject of quiet speculation among researchers. Could it have been the massive base for a lighthouse or a navigational beacon, guiding vessels through this strategic channel? Might it have been a ceremonial monument, a territorial marker for a culture that mastered these islands? Or is it a solitary piece of a larger, now scattered megalithic complex, a single surviving sentinel from a drowned ceremonial site? The absence of any other obvious ruins makes it uniquely puzzling. It stands as a stark, unanswered question carved in stone. This solitary monolith is perhaps the most haunting of all our submerged ruins because of its sheer isolation. It offers no context, no city plan, no pottery shards to date it. It is a single data point from a lost map, a definitive proof of human activity in a place that is now utterly alien. It tells us that the ancient Mediterranean was not just a ring of coastal civilizations, but a world where people ventured into and inhabited its very heart, building on islands that have long since vanished beneath the waves. To contemplate this stone is to feel the weight of a mystery that may never be solved, a reminder that some chapters of our past are written in a language of solitary stones, waiting in the dark for a meaning we can only guess. The solitary monolith in the deep Mediterranean speaks of a single, forgotten act, but the greatest loss lies not in individual stones, but in entire continents of memory. Our final journey takes us to the opposite side of the world, to the warm, shallow seas of Southeast Asia, where the map itself is a lie. What we see today as scattered islands, Java, Sumatra, Borneo, and Bali, were not always isolated. They were once the highlands of a vast, sunken continent known to science as Sunderland. During the peak of the last ice age, this was a continuous landmass nearly the size of Europe, connecting these islands to the Asian mainland. It was a world of immense river systems, sprawling rainforests, and fertile coastal plains, a paradise that existed for tens of thousands of years as a cradle for early human populations. This was not a hypothetical land bridge, but a real, living geography, a lost world that shaped the very destiny of our species in this part of the globe. The evidence for its existence and its human story is written not in submerged walls, but in the earth itself and in our own blood. Core samples from the seabed reveal ancient soil layers, pollen from long-drowned forests, and the channels of prehistoric rivers now buried under silt. Even more compelling is the genetic trail. Studies of modern populations across the region show clear lineages that suggest rapid expansions and migrations, patterns that make perfect sense when you realize people were moving across a continuous landscape, not braving open ocean. Sunderland provided the stage for a profound human drama, a millennia-long settlement of a rich ecosystem. Then the world warmed. Beginning around 14,000 years ago, the great glaciers melted and the oceans began their long, slow rise. For the people of Sunderland, this was an existential threat unfolding over hundreds of generations. They would have witnessed their world literally shrinking from the edges. Coastal villages were abandoned, river valleys became estuaries, and hunting grounds transformed into mangrove swamps. The sea did not attack, it advanced, a silent, relentless force compressing human territory year by year, century by century. This immense environmental pressure likely acted as a catalyst for one of humanity's most daring adaptations, the invention and refinement of advanced maritime technology. As the land disappeared, the survivors were pushed toward the remaining high ground and, crucially, toward the sea itself. The need to travel between the shrinking pockets of land, to fish in deeper waters, and ultimately to find new homes, may have spurred the development of the outrigger canoes and sailing craft that would later enable the greatest peopling of the Pacific, the Austronesian expansion. In this way, the drowning of a continent did not just displace people, it arguably created a seafaring culture. The loss of Sunderland echoes beyond archaeology and genetics into the realm of story. Across the many cultures of Southeast Asia and the Pacific, there exists a common thread, a deep-seated myth of a great flood that swallowed our ancestral homeland. These are not tales of a rainy 40 days, but of a permanent drowning, of a world that vanished beneath the waves, forcing the ancestors to flee in boats to the mountains that became islands. The story of Sunderland offers a powerful explanation. It suggests these flood myths are not mere allegory, but a preserved cultural memory, a folk record of the single most dramatic event in their prehistory, the day the map changed forever. The silt-heavy waters of the Java and South China Seas now conceal this lost world, making the discovery of specific settlements a monumental challenge. Yet the absence of clear ruins does not diminish the scale of the loss. Sunderland is the ultimate submerged ruin, not a city but a civilization's cradle. Its story completes our journey by revealing the grandest scale of all. Coastlines are not just where the land meets the sea, they are the ever-shifting stages upon which human destiny is written, where retreat can spark innovation, and where loss is woven into the very myths that tell us who we are. These silent stones scattered across the globe are not just individual mysteries, they are pages from the same book. When we step back and view all 30 sites as a single collection, a powerful, unified narrative emerges, one that speaks directly to the most pressing story of our own time. This is not merely a catalogue of ancient disasters, it is a profound record of humanity's enduring and often precarious relationship with a changing climate. The first and most critical lesson is this: sea level rise is not a modern invention or a future threat. It is a recurring geological rhythm that has sculpted human history for over 10,000 years. From the drowned plains of Doggerland to the submerged temples of Mahabalipuram, the evidence is written in stone on every continental shelf. Our ancestors did not inhabit a static world with fixed coastlines. They lived on a dynamic frontier that was always in motion, sometimes advancing, more often retreating. These ruins prove that the map of human civilization has never been permanent. It has always been a temporary sketch on a shoreline drawn in sand and water. This long view reveals distinct patterns of human response. We see remarkable resilience and adaptation, like the people of Sunderland who may have transformed environmental pressure into the maritime innovation that populated the Pacific, or the inhabitants of Olous who slowly, generation by generation, retreated uphill from the encroaching sea. Their stories are testaments to flexibility and quiet perseverance. Yet the archive also records moments of catastrophic failure, where societies built on geologically unstable ground like Helike or Port Royal met sudden, devastating ends. These sites serve as stark reminders that while adaptation is possible, location and vulnerability are fateful choices. Perhaps the most significant insight from this global archive is the realization that some of history's most pivotal chapters were not authored in inland capitals or on open battlefields, but at this volatile, creative, and dangerous interface between land and sea. The great port cities, the trade networks, the cultural exchanges that defined eras, all flourished in these coastal zones precisely because they were gateways. But a gateway is a vulnerable place exposed to the full force of planetary change. The rise and fall of these hubs often had less to do with wars or kings, and more to do with the sinking of a harbor floor or the salinity of a freshwater well. This collection urges us to shift our perspective entirely. We must stop viewing sites like Pavlopetri or Thonis-Heracleion as isolated curiosities, fascinating but disconnected accidents of history. Instead, we should see them as a distributed, global monitoring system from the past, a network of data points left by countless generations. They form an unparalleled archive of environmental change, recording not just the fact of rising waters, but the human-scale consequences, the social structures, the economic shifts, and the cultural memories born from that change. This is the crucial context they offer for our current climate challenges. They tell us that change is inevitable, but they also show us the spectrum of human possibility in the face of it, from innovation to collapse. They remind us that the coastline is not a line at all, but a conversation, one that has been ongoing since the first humans watched the tide come in, and one whose next chapter we are now writing together. From the streets of Pavlopetri to the monoliths of the Sicilian Strait, these 30 submerged ruins are more than just archaeological wonders. They are profound reminders that our world is not a fixed stage, but a dynamic, breathing entity. The maps we trust today are temporary sketches, and the true depth of human history is often layered in the quiet dark beneath the waves. Each sunken city, each drowned village, challenges our modern sense of permanence. They whisper that the ground beneath our feet and the shore before our eyes have always been in a slow, majestic negotiation, a dance measured in millennia. To walk any coastline now is to walk atop a forgotten world, a thought that invites a necessary humility. We are not the first to build by the sea, and we will not be the last to witness its patient advance. This long view, written in submerged stone, offers a crucial perspective as we navigate our own era of environmental change. The past does not repeat itself, but it often rhymes. The same forces that reshaped ancient coastlines are active in our world today, asking us to listen to the lessons preserved in these underwater archives. They teach us about resilience, about the wisdom of adaptive retreat, and about the profound vulnerability of placing our greatest treasures on a shifting frontier. They are a call to both memory and action, urging us to document, to understand, and to protect the vulnerable heritage of our own coastal civilizations before more chapters slip beneath the tide. If this journey through lost worlds captivated you, please support this channel by liking this video. Your engagement helps us explore more historical mysteries. Subscribe to join us on the next adventure into the past, and we would love to hear your thoughts. Which of these sunken cities did you find most intriguing? Share your choice in the comments below. The past is not always buried in dust. Sometimes it is waiting patiently in the deep, ready to surface a story when we are ready to listen.